Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tom Worth Jr. and I wanted to talk a little bit more about Ukraine today and what's going on. There's a Munich security conference this weekend and people are over there now, and so that's where a lot of news and developments and conversations and pronouncements are happening. But I came across a guy named Bill Browder, Sir Bill Browder, and he's an older guy. I mean, a little older than me, 60. I looked him up. And I knew the name, and I didn't really know why. It's just completely American business executive sounding guy, very reasonable, very well informed. And the way he was speaking about this, I just had to look him up. Like, why does this guy know so much about this? And the reason is because if you ever heard of the Magnitsky Act, that's named after his former lawyer. This dude, okay, first of all, what he said about Trump and the call with Putin, the hour-and-a-half call, and it doesn't have Zelensky on it. Browder just makes common sense statements like Trump can agree with Putin all day that the war needs to end in Ukraine, but it's Zelensky who has been fighting Putin, not Trump. So either Putin can decide to stop fighting the war, which he could do at any time, or he can keep prosecuting the war, and Zelensky can keep defending his country. It has nothing to do with Trump. Yes, we give a ton of military aid, financial aid to Ukraine, but Europe can pick up some of that, and the war is not ending until Zelensky agrees to terms. And Trump just saying, I'm agreeing with Putin that we're ending this war, is complete meaningless nonsense. Europe is not ready to throw in the towel yet on Ukraine. As Browder, another great point he made was that if suddenly the U.S. did withdraw all of its aid and Europe did not support Ukraine, which I don't see happening, suddenly Russia would have Ukraine, and there would be 20 million Ukrainian refugees flowing out into Europe, fleeing Russian domination of their country. And then the other countries would fall like dominoes, possibly. Baltic republics, you've got Lithuania and Latvia, Poland itself maybe. I don't see Poland. But we all know that Putin is not stopping at Ukraine. So it is in Europe's interest to continue supporting Ukraine until they can get favorable terms. So just Trump saying that he's negotiating the end to this war without the country that is being attacked and that is defending itself is the height of idiocy. And of course, that's what Trump's doing. The other thing that this guy points out, Sir Bill Browder, is that there is $300 billion sitting there of Russian frozen assets. Only 13 billion or so is in the US. The bulk of it, over 200 billion, is in Europe. And then I had read that a lot of that is in Swiss banks, like 200 billion, and there's another large amount throughout Europe and other nations as well. But that money is frozen, and if it's turned over to Ukraine to use in their own defense against Russia, you are going to have some very unhappy Russian oligarchs whose assets have been frozen. Some of Europe doesn't want to take that step, and I think that's part of some of the discussions that will be happening in Munich this weekend. But some of them do, and Zelensky very much wants every dollar to be, or every ruble, whatever it's denominated in, to be used for the defense of Ukraine. And the money is not in the U.S. It's mostly in Europe. So they can decide to do that. Again, this is not up to Trump to end this war. It's up to Ukraine, and it's up to Europe to negotiate with Putin. And Putin and Trump holding their own one-on-one 90-minute call doesn't resolve anything, doesn't get anyone any closer to anything. So who's Bill Browder? He is a guy, like I said, he looks and sounds American. It's because he was born in New Jersey and was raised in Chicago. Went to school in Boulder and also the University of Chicago. Went to Stanford Business School straight out of undergrad, and then went over and worked overseas. Went to London, and then eventually he was pretty young still, got to Moscow. And it was just a free-for-all over there when the fall of communism was happening. And these oligarchs had sprung up, and there was just money flowing everywhere, corruption flowing everywhere, and he was over there to seize on the budding capitalistic society that was going to be taking root in Russia. And his dad his grandfather was the head of the U.S. Communist Party from 1930 to 1945. This is Bill Browder's grandfather, who was also an American, who was born in Kansas in the early 1890s. I'm saying all this because it's a real fascinating story and it has relevance. But he became disillusioned with the U.S. The grandfather did, went to Russia, married a Russian Jewish woman, and came back to the U.S. and eventually fell out of favor with the Soviet Union. In the meantime, he was prosecuted in the U.S. persecuted for being a communist, and prosecuted. He was jailed. But his son, who is Bill Browder's dad, was one of 3 kids of this grandfather who were just amazing mathematicians. And Bill Browder's dad was one of them. And he couldn't get a job in the U.S. He was a brilliant mathematician, and all these universities were too scared to hire him in the 50s because of McCarthyism. And finally, Eleanor Roosevelt championed him, and he just went on to work at the most prestigious institutions and was just giant in the field of mathematics and became the president of the Mathematical Society. So Bill Browder is born to this guy, and so he knows Russia somewhat from his family interest there and from his Russian grandmother, and is just fascinated by it. So he figures he can go over there and make a name for himself in finance, in helping build capitalism in Russia. It's going well. They're making tons of money over there. Putin comes to power, and he is actually very relieved by this because of all the corruption. He actually believes Putin is going to root out the corruption, because that's how Putin came to power, on that promise. But after a few years, it's clear that that's not actually happening at all. Putin is just organizing all the corruption to flow into his own pockets. So he gets kicked out of the country. He has to flee. He sends his lawyer back to see why the Russians have raided the business offices over there in Moscow. And his lawyer uncovers all of this corruption over there and sees why they're doing this. The lawyer, who is Magnitsky, is promptly arrested. A sham trial. He goes to prison and dies in prison. I think it was a few days before he was due to be released. Witnesses says he was beaten to death by prison guards. Sounds like Navalny. This is what happens over there. So the Magnitsky Act is to prosecute human rights violations like that were perpetrated on Magnitsky. And countries around Europe have adopted similar acts. And that's why Bill Browder knows so much about Putin, knows so much about Russia, the oligarchy, international law, international criminal law. Browder himself was actually arrested in Madrid in the 2000s by Interpol on a request from Russia. But European Interpol quickly realized that there was no basis to that. He did go to jail briefly, but later that day flew home to England. He has renounced his U.S. citizenship because of all the persecution of his family back in the 50s. And he's just a very knowledgeable guy. And you want to talk about someone who is in the crosshairs of Putin at all times. Where does Trump come into this? Well, in 2018, Trump met with Putin, and Putin he requested to Trump, he said, hey, you hand over Bill Browder, and I'll hand over some intelligence agents. And Donald Trump went on the record and said, that sounds like a great deal. It didn't happen. Browder heard about it and was, scared he was going to be picked up and sent over to Russia. It didn't happen. I don't think a deal was struck. But the deal was offered to Trump, and Trump said, that's a great deal. This is, again, this is why we can't have Trump talking directly to Putin when no one's listening. They may, in this hour and a half call, they may have well spoken about Bill Browder in all of this. I don't know. Browder's in Munich. He lives in London now, or is a British citizen. That's why he's Sir Bill Browder now. This is, you talk about the International Criminal Court. This is something else Browder brought up about Putin and Trump meeting. How it's not just as simple as Putin visiting DC and Trump visiting Moscow, because there is an arrest warrant out for Vladimir Putin for his crimes against humanity. And the U.S. would have to hand him over if he came to the U.S. Now, would they do that? And I'm sure they wouldn't, but these are the kinds of things that would have to be worked out, assurances given to Putin before he ever flies to the United States. And we don't want him here in the United States. Trump does, and several people in his Republican Congress do, but most people don't. So I don't see that happening anytime soon. All this is to say that despite these developments, the Ukraine thing isn't over yet. The war is not over yet. Zelensky still has bargaining chips in his pocket, as does Europe. So if you've listened to any of these people speaking over in Munich, there is a man from Sweden. I mean, these are really intelligent people. When you are listening to Europeans, to their foreign affairs people, they're really smart. They're educated. They have studied this stuff. They know all the levers. They have all the relationships. And then you throw Trump and Hegseth into that. It's comical. They're like a bunch of clowns. And these Europeans know what they're doing. And I don't know. This is not over yet. And I have been pessimistic throughout the day about this. Until I was just looking more at it and being reminded of what keeps me afloat, and that it is not over, and it is kind of Trump against the world. Yes, he won in America, but he has not defeated the entire world, much as he might like to, and I don't think he's going to be able to. So hopefully you can sleep better tonight with that knowledge. We'll be looking for more developments out of Munich through the weekend. It's just getting started here. It's Thursday night. Later Thursday night over there now. But the right people are in the room and figuring things out together. So that's great news. That's it for now, and we'll talk later.